Okay, if I can have your attention, I hereby call the regular scheduled Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting to order. Chris, if you would, take the roll call, please.
Mark Arnold.
Here.
Whitney Hall.
Here.
Marvin Kusick.
Here.
Eddie Mack.
Here.
David Mason.
Here.
Cole Ream.
Here.
Don Roberts.
Here.
James Shimanek. David Trojan.
Here.
Jonathan Waddell.
Here.
We have a quorum, and we also have a 3/4 quorum.
Thank you, Chris. Item 2 is to consider approval of the minutes of the regular Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting of January 28th, 2019. You all have those in front of you. If you've had a chance to read them, I will consider a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as we have in front of us. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion unanimous. Item 3, administration, sub 1. Bear with me while I read a long sentence. Hold public hearing on an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 11, zoning, Chapter 13, sign regulations to amend Section 1113.1, purpose and objectives, to prohibit no new billboards, but to allow the upgrade of existing billboards with new technology. Section 1113.2, definitions, to add foot candle, electronic message center, and remove institutional sign and revised definitions. Section 1113.3, bonding and licensing of contractors, to all installation of small wall sign made of wood without license or bond. Section 1113.5, general regulations, to clarify prohibited signs and allow balloon signs. Section 1113.6, allowances by zoning district or special area to remove duplicative provisions for signs in planned unit developments. Section 1113.7, size, location, and other restrictions to provide standards for digital billboards, electronic message centers, and clarify prohibited signs, providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification. Okay. Chris, okay.
The background outlines the changes in this extensive ordinance and the purpose tonight is for a public hearing. I would be happy to go through the changes, but perhaps, I'm sure that you guys have read the ordinance, and so, maybe you want to hear from the public, and then I can answer any questions that you have, and our person, Angela, who handles the code and signs on a daily basis, is here too for like the practicalities if it's not the wordsmithing part. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have one person signed up to speak on this item, Wes Gray. Sir.
Thank you for this public hearing. I'm Wes Gray, the photographer. In 1975, my wife Jolene and I opened our photography studio in Enid. Our anniversary will be Sunday, and in these 44 continuous years, we have collected state, county, but as the former Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett said in Sunday's newspaper, most importantly, city sales tax. On February 16th, 2013, the Enid News and Eagle published a photograph with the caption, "An enormous Enid, Oklahoma brand hangs on the south side of Convention Hall." I was excited to see this and set up an appointment to get a permit for a 5-foot square portrait with our logo on it to hang above the windows of our Sunset Plaza studio. This was inspired by our friend Drake Boussaint's studio in Salt Lake City, located across from the governor's mansion. I chatted with our friend Whitney Box at the city office, and I could tell she was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for her to tell me no, but she did. I asked her why the print was okay on Convention Hall, and she replied the sign law did not apply to the city. I then asked her about the sign at Park Avenue Thrift Shop, and she stated the ordinance did not apply to nonprofits. And finally, I asked her why the national chain stores on West Garriott could have banners above their windows. She said it didn't apply to them if the banners came from their corporate offices. I have heard that all national, state, and city governments make laws that don't apply to themselves, to the poor, and to mega corporations. This was just the first time that it had ever happened to me. Why our city asks that only the local businesses bear this is beyond my understanding, as it is just not fair or equal. And to show the art of my portraits, I would like to see a level playing field on this ordinance that is applied to all. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to come before you.
Thank you.
There are no other people signed up.
Okay, Chris, what action do we need to take on this?
None.
None? So this is just,
Well, I'll defer to Carol, it's her item.
okay.
Well, you can vote on it, you don't have to vote on it, and you could also give suggestions. Like if there's something that you saw in it that you would like changed, if you don't do anything, it's likely to go to the Mayor and Board of Commissioners as is. But the reason why we're here is so that you can make comment and give us your suggestions. And it is not too late to make those suggestions.
Would you respond to Mr. Gray's points, please?
Yes. Mr. Gray, I understand completely what you're talking about. And I have reviewed it and made a few changes that, that I hope are heading towards what you're looking for. I noticed that there seemed to be a significant, it did look like we had exempted some of our own signs, and that we also had a tendency to be better for nonprofits than commercial, and then but then also, we've got that section of the sign ordinance that talks about if it's for economic development. So what I would say is that the economic development exception, I think it's probably a good exception, but it could swamp the entire ordinance if used for everything. I mean, so there has to be, you know, a tailoring of the economic development exception, or if not, why do we have this is only part of the sign ordinance, and it's like 30 pages. So I think it's important for the city to tailor the economic development and be more mindful that they should be mindful of that they should follow their own rules in sidewalks, in buildings, and in signs. And we've been trying to do that. Mr. Gilbert will confirm that whenever we talk about things, I'm always the one to say, now are we doing that for our own stuff?
Yeah, and I think that Mr. Gray's comments are maybe fine if there's no reason not to hold everybody to the same standard. I don't know why we wouldn't do that, so.
I did, real quickly, Mr. Trojan, I did want to speak. There have been several revisions since the 2013 sign ordinance. It was very restrictive initially when it came out. I believe that version probably came out at the end of 2012. I've been code official since 2013, and I know we've seen 2 sign revisions prior to this one. So there were restrictions, and I would highly encourage him to come visit with us in the code department and see if what he would like to do could be approved today, because it was so restrictive. It was difficult for staff as well, because we were saying far too many times no versus yes. And with our last revision, we say a lot more yeses, and we've had I think only one variance since our last revision, where we'd had probably 10 per year prior to that, or something, a large number.
And
So
all of these
hopefully it's
changes-
fixed.
All of these changes are to loosen up the restrictions a little bit, so that there's a little more freedom.
So there's an economic development exception, is what you're indicating? So-
Yes.
So who determines what is economic development? Seems to me every business that
The
decides to
mayor and board of commissioners.
And I
have
would,
economic development opportunity.
I would recommend the city commission may want to keep that, but they can do whatever they want, and you guys can recommend whatever you want to them.
Yeah, and that's not part of this, but we have, all of these changes are loosening it up a little bit and also making less of a distinction between government and just regular business, and hopefully making it a little more easy to maneuver through here. But I will say, I get lost in this, but we've tried our best. Well, I've made it just a few tiny changes. This is not my
So
sign
where
ordinance.
did this, what was the original codification? Did it originate with Enid, or was it something that was?
No, let me answer that. It originated probably in 2013 or so, as Angela was trying to explain. Many times the city does things down here, and we think it's wonderful. We do need oversight from bodies like yours and the public and the commission. And since then, we have had several revisions. I don't know how many, but it's not unlike anything that every time we pass something or change something, we're revising something. So this is a continual revision, although Carol didn't write the original.
The
Carol was
changes-
around when the code was there, and so
Yeah.
some stuff was changed then, and now it's changing again.
And I remember when I came to Enid in 1988, and we had a sign ordinance then. So, I mean, it's just, it's grown, but that's partially because the types of signs that we have changed and morphed over that length of time.
How does this compare to other peer cities in the region, even outside the state of Oklahoma?
Can you address that?
The version that was created in 2012, 2013 timeframe, Whitney Box, as he mentioned, did a lot of research in other communities, even outside of Oklahoma, and brought in some standards that were maybe a little bit more restrictive than some other communities. Maybe we were more like an Edmond, who has some more restrictive standards than, say, Stillwater or Ponca City or some of our other sister-sized cities. But at the time, there was a desire on the commission, was my understanding, for a more restrictive sign ordinance. We tried it. It didn't work for our community. We had a lot of unhappy local businesses, as well as a lot of your chain type that came in, and our sign ordinance was so restrictive that even they weren't getting the square footage that they wanted, which was why we said, okay, we've got a problem and we need to take a look at it. So we tried another revision, probably 2014, 2015 timeframe, and then another one, I think around 2016, 2017. We keep getting better. I really think we've almost got it. It's a tough document. When you pull any sign ordinance from another city, they're just intensive. There's a lot to it, and it's hard to get it perfect. But I do think we've got a pretty good one now. I think with these minor adjustments, we're getting there even more. And like I said, I would highly encourage Mr. Gray to come visit with us, and maybe what he wants to do is something that we can approve now. So I think we're close now to other communities in Oklahoma.
So is there a lot of discretion associated with interpretation of this code?
No.
Yes or no? If it's called economic development, there's discretion?
Well, that piece is somewhat discretionary, but it has not been applied that often. But most of the code is very detailed, and this is not a code that has a lot of discretion in it.
No discretion for staff, but the commission, city commission may have some if they chose to.
That would require them to come forward to,
Yes, sir.
So can I ask, just for clarification, I'm initially from Southwest Oklahoma, so you have to go over it a couple times for me, but if I understand it right, a billboard, we will not allow a billboard inside the city limits at all, but a freestanding sign, if XYZ business comes in and they want to put a 32-foot high sign up, that would still be acceptable?
Yes. That would be the signage for their business, and they
A
would.
billboard that sells advertisement, we would
Right.
not.
That's how it is currently written.
And to clarify too, the billboards that are allowed are currently the existing billboards, of which I think there's 160-something billboards in town. So at the same time that ordinance was passed, there was a desire to stop the prohibition of billboards. What you're talking about, David, I think is a freestanding sign that typically any business can put on their premises, as long as it follows the rules we have for square footage available.
I just don't want to hinder any business that wants to come into Enid and they want to put a sign up.
Under our current ordinance, we have not had a variance application in a very long time. Chris's department hears those, and I can't even recall the last sign
It's been a while.
variance that we've had. So I do believe our ordinance now is accommodating to businesses, and if we find that it's not, we may be back here again, but like I said, we were having a lot of variances, probably one a month.
And I'll just jump in too, just so everybody remembers, long before our time, there was no ordinance. It's like in the beginning, there was no ordinance. Then somebody thought it was a good idea at City Hall to have an ordinance. And then over time, that creates friction and conflict with business owners and property rights. And as soon as we change something, we all may like it, but people typically, other business owners call in and say, oh my gosh, can you believe they have this? And that's what leads to, when they talk to their commissioners or their MAPC commissioners, things like this happen. So the great thing is, it can be changed.
And the one reason I think we have it pretty close is because 2 years ago, when we had a public hearing on the sign ordinance, there were a lot of people here. It was a pack. And then the next version, there was fewer people, but still, it would have been a noticeable crowd. So if we only had one person sign up tonight, I think we've about got it there, so.
Are there any additional new restrictions, restricted signs other than new billboards?
No, we are not restricting anything at all. In fact, we're loosening regulations. Like one thing that jumps right out is the blow-ups. A lot of people want to have the blow-up temporary signage. I know Staples put one up on their building. You know, I've seen a vacuum cleaner. So we're going to allow those if this goes through and gets approved. So.
No more driving by a sign company and seeing display items through their window and
Right.
saying that they have too many signs.
Right.
So no new restrictions like that. Okay.
No. In fact, in our last version of the sign ordinance, we eliminated review of window signage at all. And that was pretty restrictive before. And we didn't like that either. It was hard to police. So people want window signage, they can put up as much as they want now.
We do have one update. Carol, you want to tell them, on the billboards, they're allowed to have.
Digital
they can do
billboards.
Digital.
If you have an
Ex-
existing billboard, you can upgrade to digital. They are very expensive, but they are, I think, personally, an improvement over the plain old wooden billboard with the plastic.
So does that mean people going forward now have the ability to apply to just start with a digital billboard, or is it just upgrade from
No, there aren't any
currently?
new ones.
Gotcha. So it's for those who have a billboard now can now upgrade, and that's it.
Yes.
So for those old existing billboards, maybe they'll be more valuable. It's just passed, I don't know. If somebody's got $250,000 to upgrade it to digital and collect their money.
It sounds to me it goes on anyway. Does the chair feel inclined to get a motion to?
I was just
to
getting
do
ready to ask the
something?
same thing. I mean, What do you guys think?
I do think the council should consider making it more fair for each entity.
I agree with that, too.
The fact that a private business owner has to follow different regulations than a public doesn't really seem fair to me.
And I just want to clarify, I don't think there's those, do we have restrictions like that in the current, this version, or even the current version? I don't think we do.
Everybody has mentioned that big City of Enid banner type. I think now is it painted on it or is it a banner?
It's a banner.
Okay, but we do allowable square footage off frontage, and there's a lot of frontage there because there's a lot of doors that you can enter. So that's how that banner can be so big, and that would be allowed for any business. If they have several frontages, we would calculate that on any, and the frontage is considered any place where a customer can enter. So if they have, 2 doors, and that would be calculated. So that's just a big building with a lot of entries. And so when you calculate that square footage, it's in the allowable amount.
Carol is looking, there may still be some things in there, vestiges of what was in there in the past, and I would agree, unless there's a good reason, and I can't think of one right now, why the ordinance wouldn't apply to everybody.
We recently reviewed one for our Parks Department, and they contacted us to put a sign out at Chestnut. I'm sorry, that name of the park's slipping my mind. Champion Park. And we reviewed that. The only thing we aren't doing is issuing the city, a permit that we're taking money for because it would just go back into our pockets. So, but we did do the review, and we've put it in a file saying that we reviewed it. So we are doing exactly what we would expect a citizen to do.
And I'm not opposed to the big banners. I have no issue with that at all, other than I just think it should be an even playing field for every entity, whether a nonprofit, private business, or the city of Enid. If the footage is there, I think they should be able to do that. But because they're a nonprofit, I don't see why what Mr. Gray was talking about.
Right.
I don't know.
And there were some flaws, like I said, initially. I think we've perfected those. Initially, when that banner was up, it was probably bigger than what we would have allowed, but with tweaks to the ordinance, because we heard a lot about that particular one. And we doubled the square footage allowed for everyone, and it seems to have fixed that problem. And that is in line with that. So, staff doesn't get a say in it, but believe me, staff hates to say no. We don't want to upset people in it either. And if it seems reasonable, every once in a while we'll get something that we're like, are you kidding me? And we'll just try to encourage them to get into compliance with what is allowed. But most of the time what people want to submit is reasonable. So we agree with that.
Having read through the specific changes of this request, it does make sense. Like, all of them are ones that are cleaning things up or smoothing it out. So even if there's still room to continue upgrading, I think we should at least let these go through so that we're in a better standing by the time they get back around to the next review.
I would also suggest making at least giving a recommendation for the council, because they're probably not going to hear the same volume of information that you all hear, and so we definitely like to hear what your feedback and input is and take your recommendation seriously. So I personally would appreciate the input from this board.
I'd like to ask Carol one more question. I heard from Mr. Gray that nonprofits were treated potentially differently than private sector. Is that what I'm to understand?
Well, that's his comments. And I do think that there were some times when we talked about commercial. Now, it's not a sinister thing. I mean, one of the things is it's based on First Amendment law, actually. And I will not bore you all with the details, but just commercial speech has less protection than other kinds of speech. If you are speaking about a political issue or it's art or something like that, that kind of speech has more protection under the Constitution than commercial speech. Obscenity has no protection. So the fact that many cities, I don't think they necessarily make a distinction between nonprofit and commercial, but commercial speech is less protected. You can have more restrictions on commercial speech than you can political speech. Political speech and the press have the highest protections. So there is a rationale for it.
So that would be a 501c3 requirement of the entity that's displaying the sign? Is that the definition of a nonprofit, or is it a business that's not profitable?
No, I think it would be 501c3, but that is not a distinction that one would find in First Amendment law. It's commercial, and then it's political, and it's press, and it's religious, and it's art. Those are protected more than commercial. Now, commercial still has a great deal of perfection, but you can only restrict it time, place, and manner.
I think one of the things I heard a lot about, especially prior to a lot of the changes that have been made, is the city of Enid had this Olympic pool-sized banner on the side of the convention hall, and people were getting turned down for having a 2-foot by 10-foot banner that said "opening soon" or "we've moved," and they were being denied those. And I think what I'm hearing from Angela and from Carol is, and from Gerald, is those restrictions are now gone in this version of the ordinance. Am I correct in what I'm hearing and thinking?
Yes, most of them have already been removed, but these are tweaks that we think need to happen to make it even better. Just like we're more restrictive right now in a PUD, which when you come in a PUD, you're supposed to say what you want in PUD, so we shouldn't have it be more restrictive than what we would typically allow.
Yes, and I also would say that I echo what Whitney had said. Is it perfect? No. Is there some things that could still be improved? Yes. And so I think what I hear Commissioner Waddell saying is, if you specifically have those things, we'd like to hear them now, because unless there's some reason, we have no issue in putting it in this revision that will go forward.
He's going to be loosened up to allow Mr. Gray to put his sign up?
I'm not sure what sign Mr. Gray is specifically referring to. I think that's where probably he and Angela could visit if he's talking. I think one issue that might be a concern, I'm not sure if it's his concern, but on murals. We allow murals on buildings now, right? But I know we've had some people in the past that wanted to put murals that were commercial-oriented. I'm not sure this version allows that. For instance, a Remax balloon on the side of a building, would this version allow?
They could have that if it doesn't exceed what their square footage is still allowed.
That's good news then, because you can have virtually anything you want, apparently, as long as it's not obscene and it meets our size requirements.
Now, just off the top of my head, what I'm thinking is, yes, if he's got some extra sign footage he hasn't used, then he could probably, put his name on it. But if what he was wanting to do was do photographs, art, and not put his name on it, then it would probably qualify as a mural. It would probably qualify as art.
I think the crux of this is that it's going to be difficult to be able to make a determination one way or the other without reviewing the project and mirroring it against the current standard.
Yeah.
So, and of course, in his unique situation, he's in a shopping center with multiple tenants.
Sure.
And there are only so many square feet that.
Yes.
And I think that's where we still have to go back and look at variances and different things, because I would like to see Mr. Gray be able to.
Right.
He's not going to put up.
I certainly hope, I'll give him my information, and I hope it's something we can say yes to in 2019 when we said no in 2013.
Need a motion just to close the hearing.
I would say so.
I would say I would like to make a motion that this goes to the city commission with some type of language where size restrictions are similar across the board for public and private entities and charitable organizations.
Uniform, consistent application of the ordinance. To all entities, whether it be profit, nonprofit, or public.
Okay, I have a motion between the two of you.
I'll second.
I have a second. I have a motion and a second, and I'm not going to repeat all of it, that Cole and,
I'll let the attorney give the, I'll use the Okie version, and David will give us the.
okay, before we go any further, and I may be looking at this wrong, if you would, on the third line, I'm assuming we are prohibiting new billboards.
Yes.
It says to prohibit no new billboards. That's a double negative. So are we allowing billboards? I would take out the word no, to prohibit new billboards on this thing here.
Okay, in the title. Okay, nice correction.
So
That's
how are
fine.
billboards defined in the code?
Billboards
There's a
defined.
definition in there.
While she looks up the definition, just to be clear, billboards were already prohibited.
Right.
So this continues the prohibition.
Exactly.
And yes, we need to fix the
That's all right.
typo you
Right.
pointed
I
out.
just felt like that with that in there, somebody could look and say, oh, double negative, we are now allowing it.
Mr. Commissioner, the definition of billboard is off-premise signage. In other words, you cannot get that good or service where the billboard is. It's directing you to a location where you can.
And the definition is the last definition on page 3. And Chris is exactly right. Well, we know billboards when we see them. No, there's actually, there is one billboard that is fascinating. There's the billboard at Jeffco, and it looks like it is on their property, and it is a traditional billboard, which just is a fascinating thought. Can you have, is it a billboard if it's on the property, but it's a billboard? Fascinating. But it's there, and so I've never really researched it.
And since we're
But
not going to allow any new ones, we.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Pardon me a second.
this next public hearing, I'm not sure anyone has signed up to talk, and this one is
Pardon me,
certainly...
Carol, would you allow
I
the
need to
chairman
introduce-
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay. 3.2 is to hold public hearing on an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 10, Planning and Development, Chapter 6, Sidewalks, Section 10.6.1, Sidewalks Required, to provide the payment of the sidewalk development fee in lieu of construction of sidewalks, may be approved by the Engineering Department, providing for the repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification.
Okay. This is tweaking the ordinance before, when people wanted to pay for a sidewalk and not put it in. Perhaps it was isolated. We gave them, it made more sense to wait till there was more that we could put together and do more kind of an economy of scale. We required them to go to the Mayor and Board of Commissioners and ask. It was, and the thought is that we should be encouraging people who do not want to put their sidewalks in to pay for the sidewalk so that the city could put the sidewalk in, or put it, or use the money to put another sidewalk in someplace else, rather than have them go through and do the variance. The variance process was the same time and the same ease as having them pay. So the thought was that if we allowed staff to authorize the payment, that it would make it easier, and it would encourage people to not seek quite so many variances, and they would pay for it instead. The reasons for allowing someone to do a sidewalk payment rather than put the sidewalk in haven't changed. This just would allow staff to do it quicker, and they wouldn't have to stand up and explain it to the city council. And if they're going to do that, I would imagine they would, well, why don't I try for a variance first? So this was just a thought we might get higher compliance by making it a little easier for them to pay for their sidewalk rather than seek a variance. And we were actually hoping that maybe you would have fewer variances to hear. That may be futile, but just a little tweak.
Mr. Chairman, there's no one signed up to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chris. Commissioners, what's your thoughts?
Outside of new development, is there any structure in place to dictate when it is or is not acceptable to make a payment in lieu of putting in a sidewalk? Like if you're the last guy on the block that doesn't have a sidewalk, I think we should encourage that, but, you know, is there any kind of policy surrounding that?
No. The engineering department would, but we have structured the fees so it is the cost of putting the sidewalk in. So it's neutral.
So what I hear you saying is that maybe the sidewalk fee is good in a lot of circumstances, but if it's the last sidewalk on the block, would we really want to offer that option or not? I think that's a good point, that we might want to try and, I don't know how we would incorporate that, but Carol is the wordsmith, so.
Is it possible for me to go to that process and pay for a sidewalk and that sidewalk never come to me? That sidewalk goes somewhere else?
That's what it sounds like.
I think that is possible.
I was asking, are those funds segregated for sidewalk fund for that specific location?
That's my question.
No, well, Carol, you'll have to chime in definitively because I don't have it in front of me, but I think the intent is to create a sidewalk fund where the commission could determine where they want to put sidewalks. I think if we get back to worrying about whether we really want a sidewalk there, then maybe we need to not offer the option and we'll just get a sidewalk there. But the downside of requiring developers to do that, or folks to do it, well, you're going to hear some of the downsides on 3 of them tonight. There's many reasons not to do it. So what I recall the change says is that there would be some sidewalk fee set up at $65 a linear foot. It'd be paid in, and the city would figure out where to put it. So am I wrong?
Okay, and these sidewalks are going down the street. That's the sidewalks we're talking about. And when the street is redone, then the sidewalk would be part of that project.
It wasn't done on both sides of Willow.
It was for a large stretch. I think the requirement is just on one side. I think Carol's alluding to, we would comply with ADA and all the laws on
Yeah.
putting sidewalks out, which doesn't necessarily, as you know from Willow, mean both sides of the road.
I'm going to have kind of a bad attitude if I'm asked to pay that and not necessarily told right off the bat that I don't have to pay it, and then that sidewalk doesn't come to my property.
Well,
I've had a bad taste in my mouth about that.
okay.
I would think that
They can do the variance, or they can pay in lieu, or
And if I
they can
pay in
do it.
lieu, I may not get the sidewalk. Because you've got the option, the city has the option to put it where they want it.
But you also have the option of just building the sidewalk and putting it in on your own.
Why would anybody give them the money to build a sidewalk that may not go my property?
Because you're giving them, once you say you're paying into the pot, you're giving them the control to dictate.
Yeah, but
not
go
just-
for the variance, it's free.
That's if it gets approved.
Small fee.
Yeah, but
Again, that $13 a square foot, that in a lot of cases, the $13 a square foot, in a lot of cases, would actually cost more than the sidewalk would cost to put in to start with. You said 65.
Yeah, I think it says $65 a linear foot.
Right.
We put that in as a value that we thought at least at the time we did it, approximated what sidewalks cost. We did recognize issues with, well, why would anybody ever do that? It's a good point. Why would anybody pay into the fee unless they just wanted to pay the money but didn't want to do the sidewalk? Because it still allows you to come and ask for the variance. But as Mr. Waddell said, the variance could be turned down, which means you have to do the sidewalk.
Anyway, but in that case,
Well, and I can certainly see wanting to streamline a process, absolutely. But I don't think this really addresses the issues we have with the sidewalk ordinance. I think it's dealing with the very least of the issues.
I agree with that. One of them was just the difficulty we have getting 9 of you together tonight. We're very happy because you're going to get to hear those 3 sidewalk variances. So one of those small changes is just to change it to a simple majority, which I think is a good change. Oh, that's the next one, okay.
It seems like it would make more sense to have, if you're going to do the fee, because that would be an area you don't necessarily for sure want a sidewalk, that's the only areas you're going to grant that, would be to make it less than what the sidewalk would cost, not at or more than.
To be frank on this, the sidewalk fee in lieu of was already in there, but it required that you would come to the commission, and instead of asking for a variance, you'd ask, hey, would you let me pay $65 a linear foot? That didn't make any sense to us either. And so that's what Carol was trying to explain, is the simple change there is to allow staff to tell them they can do it. Now, they may decide they don't want to do it for the reasons you pointed out. And I don't dispute that this is about our 6th iteration on the sidewalk ordinance.
Yeah, and we keep doing this a la carte. We keep taking one little tiny issue at a time, and I think it needs something more comprehensive. If the sidewalk ordinance and the site plan process weren't in opposition to one another, if they matched, that would be good.
and your sidewalk fund then gets paid by only property owners. A person who's a renter will never contribute to that sidewalk fund if that's the only source of funding.
Well, that's true, but in fairness, the renter doesn't own the property. So therefore, the
But the
renter
renter
doesn't.
could be using the sidewalk as much.
I certainly won't argue that this is not perfect. However, just to echo what I've heard up here tonight, if one of you has a perfect version that you could hand us, we would love to take that to a hearing to the commission.
I definitely would say we have a very good guideline within our site plan process.
Chairman and Commissioners, the one time I know that the fee has been paid in place of construction of sidewalk is when the sidewalk construction was basically go property line to property line. And there's been instances where there's a drainage way at those property lines. And it has been used when it would be to limit the sidewalk not going to the property line. They paid their fee in place. It's basically because of the extreme cost to put that drainage structure into a sidewalk across there. So in those cases, even though the fee seemed higher than what you might be able to privately build the sidewalk, and that's the purpose. If you can privately build it, cheaper should. It made sense for the developer to get a relief for that section of the sidewalk because it was a benefit to the developer, and it was somewhat unreasonable to have a sidewalk to go to a middle of a drainage way and stop. It's really hard to build. As long as it's being costly, it's difficult to build. So that's in one case when that I know that fee was requested and went to the commission and was approved.
It just seems like to me that in the last 2 years that I've been on this board, we have not ever addressed the overall problem of the sidewalks. Who gets it, who doesn't, who we make have a sidewalk and who we don't. And I don't know that this one
And we're going to have
amendment would help.
continued meetings on this even coming up, right? I didn't know if you do that or not. I just wanted to.
No, this is a hearing. The intent is probably to take this to the city commission for consideration. However, we're not opposed to, if this committee wants to examine and study how to come up with a better ordinance, we're all for that, because that's why we're here, because of differences of opinion. At one time, we were driven towards, we wanted to make the community more walkable.
Gerald, let me help you. Go ahead. So here's the issue. If you leave it up for leave it up to the 7 commissioners to come up with the city ordinance, we'll be pleasing the 7 commissioners. Right now, we're looking for input from people outside of the people who are on the commission right now who don't hear this every 2 weeks or, every month like you do here. I can guarantee you that with the experience that you have and the insight that you have and your area of expertise in which you all work in, you're going to come up with a better and more functional solution than what the commissioners on the city council are probably going to come up with. This is one of the reasons why it comes to you all first. You all have areas of expertise in what we're talking about. Now, the commission can look at it and give an approval or yay or nay or whether or not it makes sense to them. But, in the year and a half that I've been on here, I've been very much frustrated. And one of the issues that I have is that depending on who you talk to, you have a different vision on what the expectation you have for that sidewalk. What I'd love to have from this group here is what you all think the purpose should be, and then give a strong recommendation to the commission, not just what it should be, on how you would like to see it function and executed. Because all you're going to keep getting is a piece of legislation that says what we believe should be taking place. And we're going to constantly be in conflict, and you're going to constantly be trying to grant variances because their vision about what it is that should be taking place is different than what your vision is. So you've got to create a vision about what you think this should be and then put it up so the commission can either agree with you or disagree with you and then move forward with it. We're going to be back and forth with this constantly if we don't at least give an attempt to say, hey, look, this is a good vision about what we think the sidewalk ordinance should be for the city of Enid.
I think it would make more sense for us to have that opportunity to sit here and draft something ourselves than to just put in this piece.
I would say for right now on this 3-2, I don't see that the city council really needs to look at that because I don't think it actually addresses it. I think we need to go a little deeper and then do what you're suggesting and present something that's more comprehensive that actually addresses what we've been dealing with.
Out of curiosity, what was the last time we had a variance or a request for somebody to do the pay option as opposed to 6 months, 3 months, a year long? How long has it been, if you were to just guess?
I think it was it's been years. We have nobody in the last year.
So we're not going to be putting somebody in a position to where they were waiting for this to happen and it's not going to happen.
We're fixing a problem that's not there.
So
we're easing a broken problem, basically, so.
Is it appropriate for us to table this and to have it come back forward?
I'd say we motion to just reject this.
I'd make a motion that this not be presented to the city council in its current form, that a little more work gets done on it, and then we'll present. I would like to recommend something that's a little more comprehensive. I think we all would. And just in this, not trying to box your efforts or anything.
Are you going to do this at a study session or something? I mean, would you like to have a study session where you can work on it?
And it's my understanding, are we not having some public meetings that are coming up here? Or did I hear something?
No, this is the public meeting for
This is
the hearing for the sidewalk. We're having a public meeting on Cleveland, I think it's tomorrow night.
Tomorrow evening.
And there may be some other public meetings coming up, but not about sidewalks that I'm aware of.
Okay, I've had two suggestions, one to table and one basically, you started a motion there, Commissioner Ream, to go ahead and state it like you did.
I motion to table. I agree with what Cole said.
I will make a motion that we not recommend this go to the city commission to be reviewed, and we'll wait.
Basically tabling.
tabling it for a future study session so that I can study the issue further.
All right. Do I have a second? You want to second that, David?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to table item 2. All of those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that item is tabled.
Well, the good news is, because there's 9 of you here, you still get to hear 3 variances tonight later on the agenda.
They're all 3 on the committee.
Yes, yeah, probably want to be.
Okay. Now we have item 3 of this, which is to hold public hearing on an ordinance amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 11 Zoning, Chapter 2, Administration and Enforcement, Section 11-2-2, Notice of Changes in Zoning District Boundaries to clarify procedures, and amending with 1A. Title 12, Subdivisions, Chapter 1, General and Administrative Provisions, Section 12-1-8, Variances. To provide variances must be approved by the Planning Commission by a majority vote, providing for a repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification.
Well, I think this is actually, hopefully, an ordinance that has a purpose. We've been having trouble getting 3/4 of a vote of the regular membership of the Planning Commission, and so we thought, this is our rule, we can alter it, and Chris suggested that the variance be approved by a majority of the Planning Commission that is present at a meeting. So,
I think we all agree.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and several seconds to approve item 3. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that is unanimous. Okay, paragraph 4, lot splits. Consider a lot split for Coral Ann Thomas, which is part of Lot 18, Block 8, Willow West, 2nd Edition, which is a tract containing 1.34 acres. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here comes my presentation. The lot that's a piece is being split off, and the lot is defined by this yellow dashed line, and it's owned by this property owner.
that'll be great.
The property owner in blue has asked to have this piece split off and added to their property. The next slide simply shows the survey. It's recommended for approval.
Is there any problems with that, commissioners? I have a motion to approve.
Who made the motion?
Cole,
Thank you.
And
Seconded?
David?
David did.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second to allow the lot split for Coral Ann Thomas. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? And that motion carries. Now we get to variances.
Thank you.
Okay. Variance 1 is to consider a request for a variance to the City of Enid Ordinance 10-6-1, sidewalks required, for a property located at 901 North 30th Street.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners. Yes, this is one of 3 variance requests, variance on sidewalk construction for development that's going on North 30th Street. And we have shown up here on the exhibit the location, see 30th Street running up the exhibit, and Chestnut across the center, highlighted the development, which is doing an expansion or a small addition to the building, and we've highlighted in yellow the areas that would front the streets that the ordinance requires sidewalks because of the addition being added to the building. This next slide shows, just basically shows Chestnut going to on the right, and then going to the left is 30th Street. You can see the site there and the gravel entrance along both Chestnut and 30th Street. Of course, the ordinance requires, yes?
Where would the sidewalk go in that picture there?
Where the sidewalk would typically be designed on the right-of-way, right along,
So just,
probably just across the gravel area,
just on the asphalt, like you
just probably a foot off of the property line. And if I go back to the next drawing.
Would you dig into it? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how you would actually put in a sidewalk in basically a parking lot.
You shouldn't.
A gravel parking lot?
Gravel.
We would construct a 5-foot sidewalk across the area from the driveway and particularly across the driveway on Chestnut, just off of the parking lot area.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it would be a paved sidewalk with gravel on one side or the other, very similar to the trail that crosses the parking lot at the south of the stadium, if you've seen that. That's a little wider. This would be 5 feet. Okay. The ordinance requires, because they're doing an addition, I think they've estimated about 80 square feet between an addition, and they request a variance because based on those sidewalks in the area, they have a gravel parking lot and a small addition, and that's the reason for the request. Sidewalk.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Me too, I apologize for interrupting you earlier. I
That's all
didn't
right.
want you to move your picture.
Yeah. But I think those are the reasons to request, because basically it's a gravel parking lot, no sidewalks there, and it's a small addition. Certainly a sidewalk can be constructed across that gravel area. It would look kind of odd, not having to try a drive approach. But eventually, as development occurs, approaches would need to be paved. But it certainly would serve its function.
And I think this goes back to some of our broken problems. What the picture doesn't show is ultimately, you go further north, you have a railroad crossing, you go further east, you have a railroad crossing. In our effort to making it walkable, we need sidewalks to walk destinations. This is not one of them. And then you have an 8x10 office. I talked to the contractor at nauseam, and we have an 8x10 80 square foot office that's being added, which is smaller than a standard bedroom. I looked at the fee in lieu of, and if we're talking about 80 square feet, if it's $100 to build it, we're at $8,000. The fee would be $24,000 for the sidewalk. That's where we run into a problem.
I'll move a motion to approve.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion is unanimous.
Thank you.
Variance number 2 is to consider a request for a variance to City Ordinance 10.6.1, sidewalks required for a property located at 2929 East Randolph Avenue. Robert?
Thank you, Chairman. This one up here. This is, it's a variance request that you noted on East Randolph, and I will bring up the site. Again, on the exhibit here, we show the Northwest Oklahoma State University and their campus area. The Enid school system is working with them to put an early child learning center shown in blue on this exhibit here. There's a lot of frontage along Randolph and on 30th Street that based on the ordinance, since they are doing an addition and require sidewalks along the frontage, and that is the area that's been identified. Of course, the Enid school system has provided a request for variance, and the reasons are basically is the size of the development and that it provides that it basically to provide for the best use of the public funds that they propose to provide into the development and not into the sidewalk. Did I have that picture? Nope.
The school system's here too, if you want to hear from them.
Yes, we have one person
signed up.
signed up, Michael Shuck.
Michael, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, Michael Shuck with Enid Public Schools. Our project is a 4-classroom pre-K, so 4-year-old students be going to that, and we're locating that on Northwestern's campus there. We have a small piece of property there. You can see where the small blue square there, that dotted line around it's our property. We have it's just big enough to put our building and our playground on. We have a $1 for 100-year type of lease with that property. It does not abut any of the streets, any of the major streets, but we're being required basically to sidewalk all the way around the campus there. And this image doesn't show how far south it goes. It goes about as far as it does across Randolph there, further south. down to the overpass there. They have an awful lot of, they have a large site there, so they can build onto it in the future. And so we're being required now to build the sidewalk there on that orange line, and that's property we don't own. We have an agreement for that small area, but we don't have anything for that outside area. And as a public institution, we can't spend taxpayer dollars on something that we don't own. So that is one of our issues. The other part of this is that I think it's pretty clear that most of these when people follow the ordinance, build sidewalk is about 1 to 5% of the overall project budget goes to it. In this case, with that large of an amount, it'll be about 15% of our almost $250,000 to build that sidewalk in. As has been noted, that doesn't include anything for the fact that we're building along a bar ditch there along 30th that we'd need to be doing additional work to. All the different driveways we'd be having to cut through and different things like that. So that cost is going to be pretty high. And that, just that simple amount is equal to one of those 4 classrooms. And that's, we like to spend our money in the classroom, and that's going to be, that would take away from our mission to improve the community. The other part that's unique about this is the area we're in here in the part of the city where we have 2 universities. Universities are usually considered very pedestrian friendly. And I think Northwestern's really pretty good at that. They have sidewalks currently that go from the far west side of their parking all the way down to the far south side of their parking and all the way around their building. So, and then you can see the large diagonal that goes across there. They took upon themselves, they noticed the circulation paths around their campus, saw a lot of people walking across that area, and so they built that themselves. And all of their sidewalks and everything, they have security cameras, security lighting, benches, trash cans, a lot of stuff that want to kind of pull people in. So they're not necessarily, they could have designed it to where they had the circulation out on the perimeter when they originally did it. But in this case, they pulled it in where they were away from the large semi-trucks going on the highway and different things. So, and that sidewalk also connects over to Northern's and their circulation system over there. So they have the same type of thing over there that they encourage people to get out of the car and walk between buildings in that part of the community. So we'd request a variance for the sidewalk and take any questions you have.
And even if the 4-year-old lives on the north side of Randolph, they're probably not going to be allowed to walk across the street.
For all those reasons, motion to approve variance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion is unanimous. Okay, variance number 3. Consider a request for variance to the City of Eden Ordinance 10.6.1. Sidewalks required for a property located at 4722 West Owen K. Garriott Road. Robert?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, this is another variance, the last one tonight, I believe. It is on West Garriott. It's a site of Swadley's development of an existing facilities. They are, again, adding an area, I think, agenda item is about 210 feet of square area being added to the building or to the facility, which would require placement along sidewalks on the street frontage, which is Garriott Road. Go back again. This is the building site. This is the property frontage, and I'm highlighting just on the south side of the property along Owen K. Garriott Road. The next exhibit shows from the driveway west along Garriott Road, the area that would, a sidewalk would be acquired through this landscaping at some point. And again, the ordinance requires sidewalks for additions. And they have requested a variance basically because of there's no sidewalks in the area and the cost to place that sidewalk
Robert,
location.
Please back up and
Yes.
show me in the picture of the front, right there, where would the sidewalk actually be located?
Well, the sidewalk would be located typically on public right-of-way, and it can be located as designed by the developer. They have some flexibility. But typically, it would come up, it would have to come behind this landscaping that's shown here, 1 foot off the right-of-way, and then come in and then move back on the right-of-way a little further to clear this landscaping all the way over to this drainage structure,
the car
drainage
lot.
way right there. So if a sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalk be required, could be meandered in between these landscapes right in here, probably could be built, it would encroach onto those landscaping, they would have to be adjusted, moved over, the edges would not, I mean, I'm sure they would have to be adjusted, provide for a sidewalk to go through there.
How many separate property owners are there between this property and then when you get to the, where Academy and all those ones, I think that's the next one over that even has a sidewalk.
I think there's a car mart there and a C-store, a convenience store, too.
Yeah, there's a hotel next door.
Is there a sidewalk at the hotel?
No.
No. There is not.
Going east, you have the convenience store, Hampton Inn,
Yeah.
Big O Tire, Brahms, United, and then our Kmart darn store. Two.
Is that the Hampton Inn that's just barely on the picture on the right?
Yeah, I believe it's
No, I see the Holiday Inn Express. That's right next to the Swadley property. I'm talking about where you can just barely see the cars on the far right.
That's car mart.
That's Kmart.
That's car mart.
No?
It's the Academy Development.
No, go back in your slide, Robert. Go back.
It's the Academy Development on the other side of the.
Kmart is on the west
There
side.
you go. Now, looking west, you got car mart right there.
Okay,
I think the
I'm talking
question was
about
to the
on the
east.
east. On the east side.
Like where you see the
My apologies.
one row of vertical cars.
What's the nearest
This is the site here, the Holiday Inn is to the east, and I'm not sure what's I think to the east. I'm not sure what's east of Holiday Inn.
Express.
We'll pull up the GIS in the back, if you give us just a minute.
You've got Carmart to the west, you've got the Swadley's there, and then you've got the Holiday Inn Express just to the east of that, and then the Cut Right Honda to the east of that.
That's it. Yeah. Another Honda on either side. I mean, there's Honda on one side and the car mart on the other side.
Carmart to the west, it's the site, the Holiday Inn
And then,
Express, and then the Honda dealer, Cut Right Honda.
yeah.
And Robert, while everybody's looking up maps and things, did you say that it's possible that the sidewalk for it to be at the ADA required level would have to encroach into where the existing, some of the landscaping is? And is that owned by the property owner, or is that still in the city's right of way?
It would be placed on public right-of-way. That landscaping is on, most of it is on public right-of-way. There is, I looked at this today, and to get a sidewalk in here probably would encroach on one of this landscaping to the south out front, or the one to the back. To make that sidewalk through there, you probably would encroach on, one of those would have to be adjusted to some degree to provide the sidewalk.
Now, no, that's also a kind of a ditch right in there. Is there going to be any additional engineering that's going to be required to bring that up to level? And who would do that? Would that be the city of Enid, or would that be the developer?
The developer developed the plans for the sidewalk. It would just take a typical plan. Of course, there may be some little fill along this way, but it wouldn't, but I don't see the sidewalk would not block or obstruct the drainage way. The only issue would be on the west end. There is a drainage way coming down on the west side of the facility that sidewalk would end up in the middle of. So there probably would have to be some drainage pipe or something put at that stall at that location, or he may request to pay the fee for that last 20 feet and not put the sidewalk in because of the difficulties in doing that.
Pay the fee, and there'd never probably be a sidewalk put there then. You pay the fee, there's probably not going to be a sidewalk there for the 110 square foot addition.
Yes, we would not be doing that anytime soon, if that's what you're asking.
Because this is a drive-to destination, not a walk-to destination. I think it's ironic that one of the things that triggered this is the drive-through window. So not only are they not going to walk to that, they're not going to get out of their cars in the parking lot.
They did bring up the GIS system, and
Give me a,
show you.
I mean, someday you would love to connect
This
all the way to the
location site is in the
that
center.
next one as your.
Holiday Inn to the east, Car Mart. And this is Academy just
Chris, do you have an idea how
far,
long ago it was?
to the far east.
Right, got, it was granted.
And this is the
This
restaurant.
variance was probably
And the initial,
about 4 years ago.
and in his request, did it not only include the north-south road to nowhere, but it also included the request on O and K, right?
Yes,
And that was granted.
yes.
Moved to,
I've got a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Can we get a little bit more discussion?
Just a second.
I think where I'm coming from, with you pointing out 110-foot addition, I think one of the things we have to consider is the cost of the sidewalk versus the cost of the project. You know?
That's one of the things we've talked about in the process.
What's been the history of variances along that?
I know, I'm gonna get you.
Do we have a value for what that sidewalk would cost, or if they wanted to pay to not put in the sidewalk, but,
I don't know if we have a value, but I think they have a value. So when they speak, I think maybe they can
Okay.
answer that question.
Mr. Chairman.
yeah, I would love to hear from
Yes, sir.
y'all.
We have a motion, a second. We do have someone signed up, Roy Easley, to speak on this item before you take your vote.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm going to hold that motion in second.
Absolutely.
We'll allow Mr. Easley.
Yes.
Roy Easley, the architect for the Swadley's project, was also the architect for the Curtright project and the El Patio project, all of those right there together. There's no sidewalks there. Curtright, of course, had a variance on his, which is right next to this property. But the thing that triggered the sidewalk for this was an ADA addition to the restrooms and the drive-up window. So that small amount of an addition is not really for public use, and is kind of a tough thing to require the sidewalk along the frontage. So we're asking to consider the slight amount of square footage we're adding to let that not be the trigger to add the sidewalk. It's very difficult to add the sidewalk to this property because of the conditions along Garriott. It's also a sidewalk that will have no sidewalk on either side of it. It serves no purpose and is really not necessary. And I'd love to answer any questions you have about the other properties there.
Do you have a value for what a sidewalk like that would cost and what the project cost itself?
It's not the sidewalk that's going to cost right there, it's the drainage structure. And you probably, the sidewalk alone, you probably could do for $15,000. The drainage structure, you probably triple that.
What is the expected value of the ADA upgrade when in the drive-through window?
It's 14 inches by 10 feet. So it's to meet a code requirement. I don't know how you'd apply a value to that other than just a square footage value to the building.
But what would it cost them to do this upgrade?
I think they probably put in about $5,000 on the restrooms. And the drive-up window, not much of an addition, probably another $5,000, so $10,000.
So roughly $100 a square foot.
Probably, yeah.
That would be about along the lines of what we see.
and again, if those funds went to your fee, you are not in any hurry to build that sidewalk, right? Based on your earlier comment.
No, we wouldn't be, because that's a difficult sidewalk and expensive sidewalk to build because of what the architect said. So again, I don't want to stand here and defend our ordinance. Our ordinance is here because commissioners in the past, and with input maybe from MAPC people, passed it. So it's simple here to pass judgment on all the problems with it tonight, which are very evident from some of the variances. But keep in mind, when we change it, Whether it works or not is going to be whether the next set of people here, and then whatever the goals of the commission are. So whatever you would like to change, I mean, clearly there may be some things here tonight we could incorporate. So, but yes, to answer Don, yeah, if they paid the fee, we would accept the fee, but we would probably not do the sidewalk.
They
It'd be very
would never
expensive.
get their sidewalk.
And we're still looking.
Well, and to be fair, I don't think they want the sidewalk. They don't care about the sidewalk. Our code requires them to do one, much like it requires them to upgrade the bathroom, all these other.
So here's what I would say towards that. What it sounds like in terms of what we want to do for an ordinance is that we would set the priority of what sidewalks are going to get done and what areas that we're going to want walkable. And so the question that keeps going over in my mind here is that do we want this stretch of area to be walkable for individuals to be able to walk from hotel to restaurant, restaurant to shopping area, and have a walkable way in order to be able to get there? And so if we're essentially just going to toss out that idea, good or bad or indifferent, if we're going to toss out the idea for this area, that's fine. But we need to make that's where it goes back to, we need to go back and look at the ordinance as a whole and make that determination. Because honestly, in this particular, this area, to where you have a hotel to the east, a car lot, and then more restaurants further in this area, I would think in an area that had hotels in it and restaurants in it, I would think this would be an area in my mind, but I'm just one individual. This is where we have to come to a consensus. In this area, I understand we're getting ready to vote on this, we're going to make a determination. But when we do sit down for the study session, this is the hard calls we're going to have to take. I understand that drainage area, that's going to be expensive. But are we going to make that call every time that it gets expensive, that we're just not going to do a sidewalk in the area because the drainage aspect of it is expensive? And what mechanism are we going to use in order to be able to make a determination if the area is just not going to be walkable or not? Because if it's just about that area being expensive, then there's plenty of areas we're just going to be like, oh, there's no sidewalk, and then what?
Well, to your point, I do see people walking down there, and when we have the Junior College World Series come in, there are so many kids that are at those hotels, and they are walking across the whole highway, not just through people's grass. Where I get held up is I don't want to see the project cost be 2/3, in this case, of the basic sidewalk, or if that suddenly balloons by multiple more factors. I think there needs to be some kind of mechanism that looks at what you're doing and protects you from that much larger balloon at the end, especially in this case when you're trying to comply with ADA, but you might scrap the project because the ADA walkability project is so expensive.
And that goes back to the fact that a site plan process has certain square footage requirements and triggers that aren't great, but are certainly going to allow us to not have this discussion over 80 and 120 square feet. And I think when we look at the opportunities to shop and to go to hotels along Garriott, we need to look at the customer base. So do we have more people walking to that, or do we have more people driving to that? And I would say that 99.5% of your people are going to be driving to that.
I would say, is that by our own methodology? I mean,
The very fact that we have hotels all up and down through there, you're going to have large buses that have people that do not have access to automobiles. And if that's not an area that we want walking accessibility, I don't know where in Enid we would want it.
If I could, though, that's the peculiar part of this property is that there is no sidewalk. There will never be a sidewalk in front of Holiday Inn. There'll never be a sidewalk in front of Curtright. So it's a sidewalk to nowhere.
West put a sidewalk in, or Academy put a sidewalk in if you don't want it, or across the street. I mean,
I agree, but then we go back to his point to where if we're not going to put it in this area,
exactly,
where you have a hotel and restaurants, this is, to me, it's, if we're not going to do it, then let's just not do it. But if we can't keep going back and forth and saying, okay, we want to make it walkable, but we only want to make areas walkable where we don't have to pay for a sidewalk. I mean, that doesn't make, this is the confusing part about me as sitting on the council, to where I continuously get these and I sit here and I'm like, okay, do we want to make it walkable or not? Is this only for, because really we keep going back to only for new properties. Only for, the only people that we get a consensus on is only if it's a new, brand new building. If it's a brand new building, it's a sidewalk. Anything else, no, it's too much. It's going to keep us from being able to build anything at all.
Just-
But we have to take the cost into consideration because the city of Enid takes the cost into consideration, or they would have included that in part of the walk trail plan a long time ago. I'm sure Gerald would love to write lots of checks. The city council go, hey, we want sidewalks here, 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 and here. Gerald's like, I'd love to write those checks, just tell me how to pay for them.
Correct.
What we're doing here is we're saying we want sidewalks, but we don't, it's not a priority enough to try to pay for them. We're going to get business people to pay for them instead, that may or may not actually enjoy the use of it.
If not when new construction is being done, and this is where it goes down to the question you ask, at what point do we make what mechanism would we make in order to be able to get a business to put in a sidewalk? Because quite frankly, if I have to choose to whether I renovate the inside of my building or I put a sidewalk in, I'm never putting in a sidewalk. So as a community, we make the determination, okay, this is what we're going to do to push into a direction to where we're saying, okay, we want to make this area walkable. Because most of these businesses have already made the determination that they weren't interested in the sidewalk. They'd rather invest on the inside, right or wrong. So at what point do we decide? Because as it stands right now, we're dancing on this fence.
Just as a random other factor, to your point, we're having a discussion tomorrow night about the Cleveland project. That's not for another 2 years by the time it's really happening. Do we have anything on the 5-year ODOT plan past that that's planned for Enid? Like, you know, this road is in the kind of shape right now that I don't expect to see any of it surfaced.
We need to stay on the agenda. I'm sorry to disrupt that
I
constructive
know, I was just getting ready to say,
conversation.
we're kind of driving off the.
It's not on, that isn't on tonight's agenda, Commissioner.
Well, I don't think there's any harm in answering the question. I think it's in the 8-year ODOT plan. I'd have to go back and verify that to come down 412. I don't know whether that involves sidewalks or not.
If I might add, just the criteria that you all follow to grant the variance, we pretty much follow that criteria. We've tried to outline that. And the trigger for complying with one code throws us into the set where we're adding square footage, which requires sidewalks. But we're asking for consideration that it's such a slight amount that we shouldn't penalize Swadley's because of that.
Okay. Commissioners, we've beat all around this thing. I know we've already got a motion and a second. To approve, correct. So this can go two ways. So I'm going to ask for a vote, and we're going to do it by raising your right hand. All those in favor of the variance, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? By the way the motion is, by the way we have the rule right now, that motion fails because we did not have the complete majority.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So that will go to the city commissioners as not being approved, the variance not being approved.
I didn't understand that.
Okay.
I can explain that.
Go ahead,
You all right?
Chris.
Our current ordinance requires that a variance be approved by 3/4 of the planning commission. This is 11-member board. 3/4 is 9. That's how many members we have. Only 8 voted for it, 1 against, therefore it failed.
Correct.
It will still go before the city council, whether we recommend to recommend it or recommend it denial, they can still choose something different.
Yes, that's correct, and you did just approve the change on the simple majority, although that's not in effect yet, so it is, I'm sure it is confusing to people.
Thank you, Chairman.
Goes to the city, is it majority when it goes to the city?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a simple majority?
Simple majority of city council.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other items, which I don't believe there are, paragraph number 6 is to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do.
Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Enid Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition channel 112. In addition, this meeting is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.